Greetings everyone. Welcome to the third interview of Inside Out. Today we have Dr. Akansha Srivastava as our esteemed speaker. Ma'am has completed her schooling from Loreto Convent, Lucknow and started her working career as a psychological counselor in 2006. She has worked as a capacity building officer for a WHO project which involved organizing and hosting sessions on counseling skills. Dr. Akansha has even worked overseas as a program director for an after-school program at Boston, USA, where she designed curriculum for school-going children. Currently, Ma'am enjoys working as a school psychologist at Delhi Public School, Lucknow, where she plans and implements mental health support programs and counseling sessions for students, parents, as well as the faculty. Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving us your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, ma'am. So, ma'am, let's start with the most basic question. What is anxiety?
Okay, well, I'm glad you asked that because it's the word which has been used way too often nowadays.
Absolutely.
You must have heard it everywhere. People use it in various different dimensions. So anxiety is a vague feeling, a feeling wherein you're not very clear with what you're experiencing, but it feels very uncomfortable. So you might have heard of other words which seem synonymous with anxiety, like stress and worry, right?
Absolutely.
So people often confuse with that, but then I would like to say that all of them, like whether it is stress, whether it is worry or anxiety, they have important evolutionary purposes. So whatever happens, it happens for a reason. So worry is helpful to us. It might sound weird, but it's really helpful for us. It helps us to solve problems. So it is involving the frontal cortex of the brain, which involves the thinking pattern. So when we are worried, so for example, if you're thinking, is this person thinking about me? Is she mad at me? So it's kind of a worry that you have, but it is also solving a purpose of helping you problem solve. So worry is very helpful for you. When we talk about stress, stress is something which is more of a physiological response, a bodily response. You might have heard of different stress hormones being secreted. Right. The heart rate races, the breathing pattern becomes very shallow. So that is more of a stressful response. Talking about anxiety, which you asked me about, it is at the intersection of stress and worry. So it has physiological responses also happening in the body. Along with that, our thinking also becomes of that of worry, wherein we are thinking, and with anxiety I would like to tell you that it also has a function. The function is to make us vigilant, right? Okay. So if you think about it, if you're not vigilant at all, there might be things which might happen to us. So it is serving a purpose. But as we know that anything which happens in excess damages us. So what is happening is that we're using it too much and we are becoming too vigilant, and therefore we might be experiencing things like depression and pathological anxiety and anxiety disorders of different kinds.
So, ma'am, what is the difference between anxiety and pathological anxiety?
That's a great question. So, anxiety, as we've heard, and we all experience it at various times. So, for example, before an important examination, before certain stage performances, before we were doing the interview, perhaps we experienced some amount, all of us.
Yeah.
So, but you must admit that anxiety is really helpful because it channelizes our energy and it makes us more alert. So that anxiety all of us experience. But the only difference, the symptoms are also the same with pathological anxiety, but they are much more, you could say strong, intense, and for a longer period of time. So you start, when it happens recurrently, a lot more often and very intense, then is the time to start thinking maybe it could be something of a pathological kind.
Okay. So, ma'am, could you please reflect some light on what are the common symptoms of anxiety?
Right. So, anxiety symptoms could be different for different people, but in general, if you talk about, people generally experience sleeplessness. They become restless, sweating. They often have chills sometimes when it's of an intense kind. Some people even feel fidgety, nervous. They might be shivering at sometimes if the anxiety level is more. So these are the basic symptoms you would say.
Okay. And ma'am, is there any misconception about anxiety that needs to be addressed?
Oh, it's a long list. So there are many misconceptions about anxiety. First of all, people often think that anxiety disorders are not common, and therefore they feel very, feared when they want to report. They feel there's something very, very wrong with them, and nobody else feels that way. So the biggest misconception which I would like to break through this is that it is quite common. It is fairly prevalent, and therefore one must definitely go and seek help if they feel like that, because there are many more people also in the same boat, right? Other misconceptions might be that there is only medication which can treat anxiety disorders. A lot of therapies are available and very successful, and they are sometimes even more beneficial than the pharmacological or medical treatment. So there are misconceptions of different kinds. Also, people often, as you must be knowing, that the stigma is a very, very big issue, that people often feel very, very ashamed. They would easily tell that when they have a fever, but they would be very hesitant to say that they are experiencing anxiety.
Absolutely.
So yeah, these are popular misconceptions around anxiety.
So ma'am, let's start with the common anxiety disorders, and let's start with panic attacks.
Absolutely. So, as you talked about anxiety disorders, just to give you an overview, there are plenty of anxiety disorders which fall in the category. To name a few, there is generalized anxiety disorder, which is anxiety disorder wherein you feel a pervasive feeling, a long-standing feeling of anxiety. Then there is panic disorder, as you talked about. Phobias, separation anxiety disorder also comes under this category. Right. So, talking about panic attacks, it's a sudden surge of anxious feelings. The person often feels lack of control. They might even feel that they are having a heart attack.
Okay.
And you'll be surprised that people around them also often think that they're having a heart attack just because the way it looks.
Okay, so it's like similar.
It looks similar. The appearance, the manifestation of the panic attack often resembles that of a heart attack.
All right.
Right. But there is a main, the person starts having, some of them start feeling dizzy. They might even start feeling that their legs are wobbly, and they might faint or fall down. The thoughts could be, very intense, and they might start feeling that they are going to even die. So that kind of a strong, intense feeling is there, coupled with a lot of physiological responses which are happening suddenly, and it's a surge, as I told you. Yeah. So the surge of symptoms.
So ma'am, how can one identify and address these triggers to reduce the frequency of attacks?
Okay. So yes, obviously, the first thing that comes to a person's mind who has had an anxiety attack would be that the next one they don't want that, right?
Absolutely.
So see, there are certain things which you could do to prevent it or to prevent the triggers, as you said. So first of all is a lot of self-reflection. Right.
Okay.
Sometimes we are not even aware what we are feeling and thinking. Right. So maybe a lot of negativity and negative thoughts have been coming up your mind. So self-reflection is very important to understand your emotions and feelings. Journaling is a good way that you can write down your feelings, and that way you also become even more aware and clear about your feelings. Other than that, seeking feedback from others, and also one more thing I feel is that addressing past traumas if you had it. Right. So the past traumas, maybe if they're unaddressed, they could be also triggers to the panic attack. Right. So doing that work with yourself, I would say, you really need to sit with yourself and figure it all out, that what's going inside you. And often we are more aware of our surroundings and people around us, but we are not aware of what's happening inside us. So that would really help, and seeking support. That is, I cannot tell you how important that is. Even if you know there's a friend around you who could be by your side, and just stand there while you're having an attack. That could really help.
So ma'am, what are some effective exercises one can do at the moment to regain control after a panic attack?
So that's a great question, because obviously the main thing which is happening in a panic attack is the person feels out of control. They feel their world is collapsing and something big is going to happen. They might even die. So there are certain things which the person can do in that moment when he or she is having an attack. Number one, deep breathing. Right? Now you might have heard it thousands of times that everybody talks about deep breathing. Why it's important here? Because the breathing while having a panic attack becomes very shallow, and and that is a big cause of the problem as well. So there are certain techniques, whatever suits you, but like for example, you can take in 4 deep breaths, hold for 5 or 6 seconds, and then take out 7 or 8. You can count to 7 or 8 and take out the breaths. So that itself will slow you down. See, what you need to understand is that things are going pretty fast in a panic attack, and we need to slow our system down, and we need to activate this the parasympathetic system, which is basically about relaxation. So during that attack, the breathing needs to become a little slower. Apart from that, there are several sensory things that you could do. Like for example, you could fix your eye on an object. You could look at it intently. So while looking at that object, the thoughts which are you're feeling a lot, they might slowly fade away and go at the background. So there are various techniques. So there's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique, which is like that you can look at 5 things, then you can smell 4 things, and you can touch different objects, and you can there's one very good way which I feel has worked with people I've worked with, that they if there's a tap around, just go and wash your face. So that feeling of cold water on your body, that basically is kind of going to activate your touch sensation and might make you in that moment ground you. So what you need to do is use your senses to come back in the present moment and ground yourself in the reality, that this is the reality and not what's going on in my mind. So it could be washing your face. Then there's this technique. Would you like to do it with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So there is this. You need to hold on to your elbows, right, tightly, and then slowly slide your hands down like this, and touching your fingertips. So doing that a couple of times, it's actually going to make you focus more on your sensations than on what's happening in your mind. So the sensory, whatever, if you don't have anything, just touch your face and pat your face a little bit. So whatever the tactile things, smell something, whatever, if there's a flower around, just smell that flower. So that all will kind of bring you in the present moment. One very important thing which helps, I feel, is having positive thoughts and telling yourself that this is going to pass. Right? Because in that moment, the person feels that they are going to be fixed in that panic attack forever. Right? So we need to keep on repeating, it's going to be over, this is temporary, I'll be fine. This might seem scary, but it's not the end of the world. I'll be fine. There's a few seconds to go, and then I'll be fine. So all these, these kind of encouragements which you can do with yourself. Also try to be in an environment which is less stimulating, which has less noise in that moment. So if you are in a noisy place, perhaps going to a place which is a little secluded would really help. I hope that helps.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. That was a wonderful answer. It truly was.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very debilitating condition. People often feel a lot paralyzed in that moment, and I feel if it can help anybody, it will really make a difference.
So, ma'am, what should one do if someone around them is experiencing a panic attack?
So, I think it's very important for the people around, the people who are having a panic attack, to know certain things. First of all, overcrowding and being around them won't help them. That's a very important thing to know, because people often have the instinct and they're not doing it on purpose, they just want to help. Right. So they kind of huddle around that person, and that might actually intensify the symptoms. So I mean, going them and taking them to a secluded place which has less stimulation, less noise would be helpful. Knowing what to say, right? So saying things like, you're going to be fine, in a calm voice. The prime most important thing is not to panic yourself, because if you're panicking, that's going to transfer to the person who is having an attack. So be calm, be relaxed, telling them and reassuring them that it's going to be over. It might seem scary, but it's going to be over soon. Helping them to focus on any object, as I told you in the past, that if that person is having a difficulty, they can tell them to look at that flower vase or something like that on the phone or something like that. So when that person focuses on that object, the thoughts gradually fade away. Also, thinking of something which makes you happy or at peace. So maybe if you're a friend and you know that I have a very good relationship with my pet, so you could tell me that, think about your pet and just imagine the time when you were playing around with your pet and having a fun time, when you were having a good laugh. So all those, visual imagery things can, actually take you in that mode wherein you start feeling more and more in control, at ease with yourself. So that will gradually help. But obviously, in case of recurrence, we need to seek medical help, right?
So ma'am, how can one differentiate from occasional panic attacks and a more serious condition?
Okay, right. So there are people who have experienced panic attacks a couple of times in their lifetimes, and it never happened to them again, thankfully. So it could be those scenarios when people have panic attacks. So a panic attack does not necessarily mean that you have a panic disorder, right? That is the thing to understand. When does a panic attack become a disorder? When it's recurrent, it's happening again and again. Also, when the person feels that, they're in constant worry that the attack might happen. So it kind of dominates their life. It keeps on happening a lot more than expected. They are troubled by the thoughts of having the panic attack, and as a result, they are not able to function. The main thing which I feel we need to understand in a disorder is that the functioning gets disrupted. So, for example, with us, we have apprehensions and fears, but we are able to function. You are able to come to school, I can go to work, we can function normally. But with a disorder, sometimes that, we need to notice that the normal functioning is getting disrupted. And that is the time when we feel, okay, we need to get assessed and we need to go to somebody and see if we have a disorder or more serious condition, rather than just a panic attack.
So ma'am, what lifestyle changes or self-care practices can help reduce the frequency of anxiety and panic attacks?
Yeah. So there are many ways in which you can do, and in general these are good ways. I mean, it's not only for the anxiety disorder, but for anything, for any person, we need to chalk out some time for doing and slowing down. Because in this fast-paced lifestyle, all of us are rushing and running, and we have deadlines to meet, and we have so many things to do on our list. So we need to slow down a little bit, especially in the morning time. If you could do a few rituals like meditation, you could do deep breathing, even if it is for a short span. Also, breathing could be used after several hours in a day also. Like you can have like a 4-hour interval and have a few deep breaths, and then again a 4-hour interval and a few deep breaths. So breathing is something, breath work is something which I feel can be done at a regular interval, and could be a part of a lifestyle rather than just being a schedule which is done in the morning. Apart from that, obviously diet, nutrition, getting proper food. Avoiding caffeine also has been found to be lowering the anxiety symptoms.
All right.
Right. So if you might be having a lot of caffeine, it could be triggering your anxiety. It's not. For some people, it really does. So we might try cutting out on the caffeine as well. And in general, getting proper sleep and obviously staying away from the social media. It can really escalate the anxious thoughts. Because there's so much crisis news, so much of negative news, it might trigger the anxiety a little more.
So ma'am, what are the long-term treatment options which are available?
Absolutely. So if a person is not getting relief from these temporary lifestyle changes or self-help techniques, they might be benefiting by seeing a therapist. There are a lot of effective therapies. The CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, is found to be very effective, and it is also not a very, very long therapy, so it is effective and found to be very helpful with combating the negative thoughts, which are a main feature of anxiety. Along with that, people often go for medication also, but it's not that medication is the only way. So both these things could be used.
So ma'am, does medication also have side effects?
There are a lot of good medications also available. So there are medications of a mild nature which do not have any serious side effects. If they experience certain side effects, they are mostly temporary and not harmful to the person.
So ma'am, let's shift our topic of conversation to social media addiction. As we know, it is growing a lot in the youth. So what are the common symptoms which you would tell?
Yeah, Ashvi, I mean, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked, because that's becoming a growing concern.
Exactly.
And not only among a particular age group, I would say. It's like this, if you see a toddler, they're hooked to the phone.
Absolutely.
And if you see people who are in the old age as well, they are all hooked to the phone. We are all getting so much pulled by that small instrument or gadget. So yes, it's a growing concern. The signs and symptoms of social media addiction, because people often think whether they are addicted or they are normally watching. So we should know when a person is showing certain signs of addiction. So one thing I would like to say, that the usage of a person who is addicted to social media would be much more than a person who's actually casually watching the phone. So the span of using the social media is a lot. It's huge. Also, they show signs of distress when the phone is taken away from them, or they are asked to put down the phone. And parents often will do that because they are well-meaning, people, and they want the child to be off the hook of the phone. So the person shows signs of distress when they're told to leave the phone away, or they may even have angry feelings, negative feelings towards the person who's asking them to do that. In certain cases, people also become violent because they're being asked to take something which they're really attached to. Right? So that could actually, it's in many ways, it's like the other kind of addictions also. Right? In other addictions also, if you take away the substance from the person, they feel very upset and angry, and they might even cry or show rebellious behavior. So here also this is a basic symptom. Then that person also, a person who's addicted to social media, will also be using it perhaps as a coping mechanism. So whenever they're upset, they would start scrolling, and whenever they want to escape the reality, they would start going into that. So that also propels, that also gives a signal that that person might be addicted to social media.
So ma'am, what strategies can parents and educators use to prevent social media addiction in young people?
Absolutely. So I think the dissemination of education has to be there, that it has addictive properties. People need to know that. It's just not that they're watching phone, it will not lead to anything. It might lead to a more serious condition wherein they might have to seek actual help for doing that. And that's when the realization needs to sink in that yes, it can grow into a bigger problem. Right? The first thing is that. Second thing, yes, limiting the time. If you feel you do not have the impulse control, put a timer. Use a timer. Do something which makes you accountable, and wherein you can stop when you want to stop. Again, take breaks. Form meaningful connections with people. Right? So what is happening? Yes, absolutely. We need to have more offline friendships.
Offline friends, exactly.
Right? And if I have a very good bond, so for example, I have 2-3 good friends, perhaps I might not even feel the need to go on social media that much. I might go for certain things, right? But not for seeking validation, not for seeking appeasing others, or seeking appreciation from others, because you must be knowing that that it's a loop. So when you post something, people respond to that, and it gives you a feeling of a reward. So you feel, oh, I posted this and there's so many people who are liking that, and it's a very happy feeling that you get. And that kind of it's a loop. It's a loop, and it makes you post more, and then it's a circle. It's a vicious circle which is making you post more, people liking it more, and then posting more. So we need to seek external validation, and moreover validation from ourselves, that we are good enough. We don't need people to give us 1,000 likes to be nice, and we don't have to have 1,000 followers to be a good person, and to be to be who we are basically. Right? So that really helps to have offline connections and support from family. Having good hobbies and interest. So if you're left alone, you shouldn't be that's the only way to pass your time. You should have hobbies, tons of hobbies you can have: embroidery, music. So if you have other hobbies, you will also get that happiness out of that. So, and also one more thing for students, I would like to say that having a structured schedule would really help. So if you have everything planned out, that from morning you're engaged in this activity and that activity, and then you have
have a busy schedule.
Absolutely. Busy, or maybe more structured, I would say. It should not tire you out, right? But it should be something wherein a predictability has to be there. The evening when you go home, these are the 4 things I need to do. And I recommend having a to-do list for everyone, so that and you have something to look forward, that these are the goals for today. Right? So if you have your goals chalked out, if you have things planned out, there is little room for going to the social media. And And if you'll go, then you know that you're going for a reason. It's important to you. I think that's pretty much it.
So, ma'am, what advice would you give to the parents who are watching?
Yes, parents, I feel, all of them want to do a good job. Everybody, this is the only thing which I think people don't have a manual to bring up a child. For everything else, we have a manual. We have a manual for television, how to operate it. But parents are not born with a manual to, bring up a child. They're doing a beautiful, fabulous job. It's just important to be mindful and to connect more with the children. So if you want to correct a child, I feel you have to connect with him first.
Right.
So what is missing is sometimes the connect between the parent and child, and therefore they go to all these things, to the distractions, to social media, to other wrongdoings, because that connect is missing somewhere. So I think just leave other things as secondary, and this spending quality time should be the main thing, which has to be
first.
Yeah. So that's the advice I would like to give to parents.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was wonderful doing this interview with you, and I feel that my knowledge has really increased. So thank you
It's a
so
pleasure.
much.
It's really fun being with you, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, ma'am. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.